everybody, this is City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I have a scrapbook layout that I made using the January My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kits. And this kit features the collection called With Love. It's a collection made by Prima and the designer is Frank Garcia. The first thing I decided to do for the layout was take a sheet of paper that was covered in hearts, and you'll see that in a little bit, and fussy cut the whole paper. After I fussy cut all the hearts out, I punched holes like you just saw, and I made the holes very close together because I wanted small stitches because the hearts are fairly small. Now I'm doing a back stitch, and I will go around the outside of all the hearts doing a back stitch. At this point, my plan was to take the hearts and border or make a border around a heart with the hearts. And I don't end up going with this idea, but I do stick with it for a bit. So I'm arranging all the hearts on the larger heart. And now I'm using that heart as an outline. I decided to cut out the center and just make an outline of a heart. And then I was going to arrange all the hearts onto that outline. I want to have a mixed media background, so I take that heart and I trace it on a piece of my favorite 120-pound smooth white cardstock, which is already covered in some white gesso. I'm going to be using the packaging technique. I'm so sorry, the sun is so bright and I think it impacted the focus, but it's still pretty good. You can still see all the mixed media, and it does clear up in a bit. I'm adding some Tattered Angel sprays around the outline of the heart. I'm using a couple of different colors of pink, and I'm just spraying them on the background, and I'm squishing them down with the plastic. And since this isn't the first layout that I've made using this collection, I kind of have an idea of which colors in my stash will look best with the colors that are in the collection. I am going back in with some gesso. There were a couple of spots that I missed on the background. I'm running out of gesso. This is the last of the gesso that I have on hand, so I put a thinner layer than usual on the background, but you do want to cover that up because you can see it looks funny. The color will look different when there's no gesso behind it. So I took care of that, and now I'm going in and just adding more layers of color. And I do dry each color in between rather than putting more color down on wet color because I like the effect better when there are layers that are dried. I add some splatters in each of the colors of pink to the areas that are pink. I do like to add a lot of splatters because in the end, a lot of what's done in the background gets covered up, and I do like to have some of the splatters showing. So I did add quite a few splatters. Now I'm adding some of this green color. This is another Tattered Angels Glimmer Mist, and continuing to use the packaging technique. And in addition to that slightly darker or duller green color, I'm using this brighter color. This is a Tim Holtz Distress Spray, and I love the way that color looks. I feel like it just brightens up the whole background and just makes everything look vibrant. So I'm continuing to add some layers of color in both colors of green. And I like the way that looks with the two colors of green and the two colors of pink combined. I think it just adds more interest rather than just using one shade of each color. Putting down some splatters in green. I dry the background really well, make sure all the sprays are completely dry. Then here I'm going back in with some water and I'm sprinkling it over the top of the areas of color. And I'm using a paper towel to blot up the color. And I love the way that this technique works. It lifts up some of the color and creates these really cool little spots on the background that just give so much interest and just variation to the color that's in the background. So it worked really well on this particular layout. I don't know what impacts it. Sometimes the technique causes more of the color to lift off and sometimes less, but it seemed to work really well on this, and the pink especially, I feel like it really looks cool. So I'm going around the entire layout now with some watered down white acrylic paint, and I do this on the majority of my mixed media backgrounds. I really love the way putting white splatters on the background looks, and the way that it kind of evens everything out and brings everything together. And sometimes I feel like I can never have enough white splatters on the background. I sometimes will go in multiple times and put more. When they dry, they do tend to lighten up because there's water added to the acrylic paint. So now I'm going back in with some distress oxides. I'm mixing together picked raspberry and forest moss, and that creates a colorful brown that goes with the colors that are in the layout. I'm just using the dauber and going around the outside of each heart, and I'm being very careful not to get the ink on the stitching that was just done, because I feel like that would just make them look kind of muddy. Now I'm going back in with some paint and covering up some of the areas that I feel like got a little messy. I mean, the whole thing is messy, but I don't want to have too many stray splatters and areas of color. So I fixed that. And now I'm going to be creating a background. Here I'm inking the edges of my photo. I matted that on some white cardstock and also this same pattern paper that you see here, this pink paper. And recently I've been using this technique to create backgrounds. You have the option of gutting a piece of paper, and I do use that technique quite a bit, where you just cut out the center of a piece of paper. I kind of like, though, when I have a full 12 inches of paper left over, instead of having a square cut out from the center. You could do more with the paper, I feel. So lately, just to kind of conserve the paper a little bit, I've been just cutting these thin strips and cutting 45-degree angles in the corners of 2 of them, and that makes a nice little frame, and I don't use up too much paper. I had this piece of paper in my stash. This is a piece of cardstock. I've had it in my stash for I can't tell you how long. I got it many years ago when scrapbooking was just becoming really popular, and you can find scrapbooking materials all over the place. I found this cardstock in Costco, and that color was just perfect to match in with this collection. So I'm layering that over the frame that I created, and I started putting adhesive on the back of the mixed media, and then I thought that I wanted to distress the edges of the paper. The paper is really thick, so it's a little hard to distress it even with the scissors. So once I had attached it down, I went back in and I started to crease it and put little indentations in it, just to give it a more distressed look. Using the scissors didn't really have the impact I wanted it to. So now I'm rotating the layout and making little tears, trying to make them look natural. I decided to make this heart outline a little thinner. I put it on top of the layout, and I'm now popping it up on some adhesive foam. I believe that's a 1/4 inch foam. I peel off the backing, I stick it down, and I don't like it. I just decided that although it's nice, I just didn't like the center. So now I have a new idea. I still want to use a heart, but I decided I wanted to have a solid heart in the center of the page. So I used that piece of paper that had a heart cut out of it to draw a heart on this large piece of paper. I've cut 1/2 inch strips. You could see I just put one strip of ATG adhesive over to the left, and now I'm just attaching down some 1/2 inch strips, and I'm going to weave the 1/2-inch papers through those strips. So I basically want to have like a large area that is woven that's the size of the heart. And that's why I drew the heart on the paper. I just wanted to make sure that this was going to be big enough. And I have done a little bit of weaving on pages before. I've never made something this large. It's usually just a couple of strips. So this was just the way that I came up with. I'm sure there are other ways to do this, probably ways that are a little easier than this, but this really didn't take too long. It really wasn't too hard to do. I just went back and forth and wove the strips and used my scissors to push the strips even further back once I had pushed them against each other with my fingers. And I just continue weaving the paper until I had covered the whole heart. I just peeled it off of the background. It all came up very easily. Now I'm tracing a heart around the outside, and I'm putting adhesive on the back of the heart, and I'll attach that down to hold all the woven pieces in place. You can see I'm putting a lot of adhesive on there to make sure that everything stays in place. And then I'm just using my scissors to cut off the excess. Once I put this on the background though, I realized that I thought the heart was too big. So I took that heart that I peeled off the background. I didn't show that on camera, but I did peel it off the background and I could discarded it, but I took it back and I used it as a tracer. And now the heart is the right size, and now I'm happy with the background. So I'm going to continue making the layout from here. I will say that I did go back and glue a couple of those edges down where the strips of paper were woven, and just to give it a little bit of extra security, but it stayed together pretty well on its own. Now I took this ribbon from my stash. I like the little lacy edge on it, and I cut it into 2 pieces because it was a little hard to get it around the curves of the heart without it popping up, but I don't think you can tell that it was pieced together. On the bottom I folded it a little bit. You can see on the bottom there's a little fold, and I also decided I was going to put another layer down of this pom-pom trim, which I had used on another layout recently, and I really like it. It's very delicate, and I think it matches well with this layout. Now I'm taking some rosettes. I have been using rosettes with this collection. I'm kind of on a rosette kick, so some of them are left over from another layout, and some of them I made just for this layout. There's another layout that I will link in the description box that has a quick demonstration on how to make rosettes. I'm sure there's plenty of great videos out there. These are very plain, but they're very easy to make, and I think they add a lot of dimension and texture to the layout. I have the clusters in place. I did end up using some of those stitched hearts, although not the way I thought I was going to be using them. Some rosettes, some of the flowers that were included in the kit, and I'm adding some florals to the clusters. I have a few different floral dyes that I use over and over again, and I decided to leave them white for right now. I wanted this layout to have like a clean look. I also added some of those frames over to the right. Those were fussy cut out from the papers, as was that strip of roses that I just put down. As a final touch, I'm adding some self-adhesive pearls to the background. I'm adding pearls in mint green, pink, and a darker pink. And I'm not only putting them in the center of the rosettes, but I'm adding some little clusters that are made up of the different colors, the 3 different colors, and I'm also trying to vary the sizes within those clusters. And some of them are very, very tiny. You'll see in a few moments I end up using a little tool that's made for clay in order to manipulate those tiniest pearls a little bit. After I have all the pearls placed on the page, I take this layout and I put it aside for a couple of days. And I don't have everything attached down to the layout. So a couple of days later, when I looked at the layout, I felt that I liked where everything was. I was still fine with the placement of all the embellishments, but I felt like it needed a little something extra. And I thought maybe the florals that I had placed around that are white, I thought it would make sense to make them another color. So I decided to pick the rose gold color that is in the flowers and in some of the papers of this collection. So I heat embossed all of these florals with rose gold, and I feel like that added a nice little something to the layout. And now I'm just going around and I'm placing them around the layout, and then I do go back and attach everything with my glue. And that is the last thing that I do on this layout. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Please head on over to the My Creative Scrapbook website and check out all of the beautiful kits that they have available every month. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for liking and subscribing and commenting. I hope that if you're not a current subscriber, you'll consider subscribing. I hope to see everybody again soon, and I hope you have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.